How about you? What about your work? I think you came from this transformation background, and I think even for you prior to coming into Indigo, you were also working for another major business. So we would love to learn more about your journey and what led you to your current role.
Yeah, so I was at Cushman and Wakefield prior to joining Indico Data, and there I was really leading up, our automation COE, standing it up as well as some other business transformation initiatives. And it really started with just RPA, right? So that repetitive rule-based task automation or desktop automation. And we really started to extend our stack. So really thought about unstructured data and how it plays a role in like processes and like the value that it could unlock for the business. So we actually had added Indico Data to our stack a couple of years ago, and then I ended up joining Indico as leading up business development for us, and how we think about go to market and really helping others like extend their stack. So it's been really exciting.
That's so incredible. And I think for you, for someone who have implemented the right tools and truly, enabling your teams to pull intelligence from semi and unstructured data to make a difference, I think it's going to be so exciting to hear how you could have this conversation with Chris, because you could probably share a bit about your experience on that front as well. But until Chris is able to join us, I'm curious in terms of us being in 2022, how different has it been for us? How important is it for us to now look at this semi unstructured and unstructured data to then help inform business decisions?
Yeah, I think we've been RPA, really started taking off, I want to say like 2017, and it's really started to we've seen the snowball effect, right? So like a lot of RPA, a lot of automations going into production. But what I think, I was running into when I was leading, and what a lot of folks are running into, is you kind of get stopped, right? Because sometimes in a process, like a document may come up and you need to interpret data from that document in order to actually like start your downstream processes. So I think that's the inflection point I think a lot of folks are at right now, is this process is stopping, right? Because something unstructured is coming in and they can't really write rules around it. So how do I actually like understand this data so I could have like full end-to-end process automation? And I think, the pandemic has it's accelerated process automation for a lot of organizations, and it's really started to expose that start and stop from an automation perspective, allowing companies to start searching for how do we actually solve the unstructured data part, so that way we could have full end-to-end automation. I think 2022 is going to be a big year for a lot of folks as their COEs are matured and they're starting to see, at least that foundational value from their automations.
I can agree more, and I think as we think about the maturity journey and how we wanted our teams to feel like these bots are here to hopefully free up their time and allowing them to focus on more high value tasks, and hopefully inspire them to think outside the box and continuously develop better leadership skills as well. I'm curious, within your expertise, have you seen what some of the upper limits of AI are? And, is it something that you could share with us? Because I think it really depends on the business process. But are so many aspirational conversations around, could we possibly eventually reach this 100% accuracy level where we can deliver that end-to-end automation? And I know it all depends on the business process, but for you in this space as an expert, what are your thoughts?
I don't think we'll ever get to 100%, right? Like, I think that's a tall ask, especially if you think about the way a lot of organizations in the economy is changing, right? We're in this great resignation right now. We've got a lot of people leaving, a lot of new folks coming in. So if you think about it, all of us, right, we're already in this like fragmented, variation in like process, but now you're losing knowledge and then you're bringing on new knowledge, right? And you're having to like train and upskill them in these processes. So I think naturally that's going to continue, right? People are, starting to figure out what they really want to do. in their careers. So I think there's always going to be this natural fragmentation or variation in processes, and that's okay, right? Like automation should play a role in being able to handle that and at least handle, the foundation of those processes. What I think is going to be really important to your question is upskilling and reskilling our workforce, our human workforce, right? To enable them in the best way to work with the machines that are really at the foundational layer of that workforce. And really like augmenting their time. Like we always say automation, it's really more about augmentation, right? And creating that in the most impactful way.
Thank you. I'm so glad we started our conversation a little bit early. So thank you for
Yeah.
rejoining us, Chris. I'm sorry for that inconvenience, but I am so glad that you're back. So I'm gonna give the stage back to you both.
Yeah,
Sure.
great.
No problems. Just some unmuting issues brought in as regular participants and not as part of the team here. So no worries. We overcome. We adapt. We overcome.
Yeah, well, Chris, it's good to be here with you today. As a former colleague and now a customer, I'm really excited to share your story. It's really exciting. I think others will really see some value from it. So before we get started, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what JCI does.
Sure. So Johnson Controls International, JCI, we're the global leader in building products, building technologies, and building solutions, integrated digital solutions for buildings. So we build the assets within the buildings themselves. We install them. So everything from the large industrial HVAC units, the big chillers that you'll see on top of skyscrapers and buildings, fire detection, fire suppression, building security, cameras, the sensors, alerts, as well as building management itself, right? Making intelligent buildings around buildings that can monitor themselves, monitor the environment, monitor their usage, and adapt their energy needs around the usage of the time and the environment. So we've been around for 135 years, since 1885, actually more than that now, 1885. Warren Johnson was the original inventor and patent owner of the teleelectrothermoscope, which is the long lost ancestor of your home thermostat. So
interesting. Thanks for the background there. Chris, you and I have, we've met before, and you've been on this automation journey now for, I want to say, a couple of years. So maybe could you help us understand like really how that got started?
Sure. Johnson Controls, as you can imagine, with a company of this size, has a lot of different business units and functions within itself, right? And so like many large companies, the business is always looking for the next advantage, either whether it's in their own operations or whether it's in sales or whatnot. So within JCI, we had a large number of products that were doing automation. And, I want to give a shout out really to our finance organization, Shared Services, because they were really the pioneers of RPA within JCI. They had brought in a product, and you can imagine in a financial shared services environment where they have, hundreds of thousands of iterations and it's all manual logical processes. It was ripe for RPA. In 2018, Johnson Controls understood that there's an advantage of being able to take all these disparate platforms that we had across the environment and kind of bring them together and rationalize the portfolio of tools that we had and be able from a central position to leverage that out to the other businesses. So we did that in 2018. We brought in probably 5 or 6 different tools that were being used in various different places into what's now the Center of Excellence. And we have now, actually, I'd like to call it it's a governed but federated model. The individual business units have a lot of their own development capabilities and discovery capabilities. But we also, from the hub and spoke here at the Center of Excellence, have the same sort of resources to be able to build for the business units that don't want to ramp up their own capacity, as well as being able to take over some of the larger discovery initiatives and the larger discovery events across a particular business unit, looking wide ranging for ideas.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think it's important to empower the business, right? But also ensure that they have a support for something that's more complex or strategic in nature. So you mentioned RPA as really being the first part of the stack. Maybe help us understand, where RPA like fit well, and then how you all started thinking about, because you started adding to your technology stack, adding to that stack, and really like the why behind it.
Sure. So if you think about the automation transition from your at one end, you've got your most basic macros, batch files, all of this other kind of stuff that's just, very simple, very easy to implement, but pretty brittle. And you move up towards the other end of the line where you start having more of the ML, AI, and more of the intelligent automation. We started out with our products as on that lower end of the scale, with RPA, with a couple of different products, Blue Prism, Azure, a couple of other solutions in there as well. And over time, we condensed a lot of those platforms. We sunsetted some of the platforms. And what we then did was, as use cases came along, we started to look for other technologies that would not only complement the stack, but also solve the use case that we had in hand. A recent example of that is the Indico product. We had a use case where we, as a company this size, you can imagine, we've got hundreds of thousands of AP invoices that come into Johnson Controls worldwide. So to any extent that we can automate the process of intaking those invoices and being able to process them, doing the three-way matching and whatnot in the ERPs, is time saved. And at that volume, but that's a lot of savings. So we started looking for various different ML products that would help us do IDP, or intelligent document processing, in conjunction with the RPA, which was doing, the heavy lifting of moving things through the process and system. So we looked at a number of different products, and that's really the way we go about it. We don't search out new products until we've got a particular use case for them. And when we do, we look at all the products that we currently have, and put together, as any company would do, put together this giant Venn diagram of what do we have, what can we do, what comes in, what should go. And in the case of Indico, it was, we don't have an IDP tool. And the ability for the business to train models, and the ability for IT to maintain that model, but really the business drives its innovation and drives what the next use cases are. That's really how we add the stack.
Yeah, no, that's really great. So you're able to really unlock that unstructured data, and then have that rule-based processing downstream, right? Creating more value in those business processes.
Yeah, and that's really where, and I guess I'm going to come back to the Indigo product. That's where, everybody's been doing OCR. OCR has been around for decades. And the products that have been the previous generation of products that dealt with documents, dealt with a template-based system where you can classify a number of different templates you're going to use for a different vendor. I'm going to stick to the AP invoicing example that we were doing. You can imagine how many tens of thousands of vendors we've got within JCI. So imagine trying to keep tens of thousands of templates that are all geared toward Granger invoices and toward Fastenal invoices and so on down the line. It's just impossible. So the new generation of ML IDP tools, such as Indico, allow you to be able to teach a concept of an invoice, not classify as a Granger invoice or Fastenal invoice or whatnot, so that the next invoice that comes along from a vendor we've never seen, can still run through the system and still make its way down. So that it's probably one of the more innovative tools that we have in the stack at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think, when I was sitting in your seat, people would always talk to you about invoices and how they're structured or semi-structured in nature. And at a large organization, that's actually just not the case, right? Like you have thousands of vendors, and also like all of those vendors are changing their invoice format like quarterly if you're lucky. Sometimes you're getting a new one every month, and depending on the location, it could be a different type of invoice. So it's really tough to say even invoices, which seems like simple, right? It's actually a little bit more complex to ingest and actually process.
Yeah, you make a good point. I actually put these in the semi-structured, from the standpoint of, if you hold up an AP invoice from somebody, you can look at it and say conceptually, yeah, that's an AP invoice, right? But if I hold up another AP invoice from a different vendor, you still say, yeah, that's an AP invoice. I get that, but everything is switched around. There's different formats to it, different tables, different ways that different information that's on it. So it really falls into the semi-structured realm of things. Unstructured data would be considered something like a long form legal contract, or a magazine article, or something to that effect. A legal document or a legal brief, right? There really isn't a format to it. Emails fall into that same thing. It's structured when you look at header, body, and signature, but beyond that, internally, it's unstructured. Right. So having a tool that can understand the concept of a semi-structured document and be able to do it consistently over and over was exactly what we needed.
Love that. So maybe let's talk about, because you all have a use case in production. So let's talk a little bit about the first use case that you all have in production right now, and the value that you're starting to see having this, addition to your technology stack.
Sure. So the use case is all around processing accounts payable invoices. I've mentioned it a couple of times here. And we get hundreds of thousands of these a day across the organization worldwide. For our pilot, and we're actually now in phase 2 of it, but for our pilot, we took a particular business, and we basically started with an RPA shell around the outside of it, thinking so we're getting invoices in. What we want to be able to do is take those invoices, put them into our workflow system, which currently the manual, the folks over at the shared service centers are using. They're taking the invoices, they're placing them in our workflow system, and then they're actually going off to the ERPs and doing AP processing, right? So what we wanted to be able to do was build an automated solution that could take in and ingest those invoices, bring them into our workflow system, and actually perform that AP matching. And the IDP portion of that is being able to have a service or a solution that we could hand off these PDF invoices to and be able to get actionable data out of it. So we hand in a PDF. Out of Indico, we get the fields and values, keys and values that are contained within the invoice, and being able to take that information and then enter it into workflow, get that taken care of. So we've got the governance and the auditing taken care of, and then actually log into the ERPs, find the goods received notices, find the POs, and if they match, and of course there's a million business rules along with it as well, but if they all match, you wind up having a touchless AP system. Now, it would be great if that was, turnkey being able to do that, but we have had some lumps along the way. What really has happened is we found a lot of things within the process itself that are really exceptions in business processing. From an IT perspective, we've built the tool that does it. We've built the RPA, we've built the automation, and we've got the right tool in order to understand the document. So eventually our goal from an IT standpoint is to get up in the 90s from a percentage of being able to handle hands-free. The combination of business exceptions and some of the internal workings of JCI with around goods received notices and purchase orders hasn't allowed us to achieve that. But that's part of the reason why we're moving into phase 2 in order to augment the business rules that are there in order to be able to achieve that going down the line. I guess I'd say this is when you approach this type of automation, you have to look at it in an evolutionary sense. Start small. We may have started a little bit bigger than we really should have, but start small and understand that there's a paradigm shift that has to take place in your thinking. It's no longer just a black and white, if I can describe the decision tree, I can go all the way from the start to, 100 different leaf nodes of logic at the end. When you're dealing with IDP and you're dealing with documents and unstructured data, you also have to start thinking about how you're getting that data back and how you action that data, right? And that's a new wrinkle to RPA. And we've learned some lessons, but I'm confident we'll make it to 90% probably by the end of the year in our processing.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think like the nice thing about automation in general, especially in larger organizations, is it does expose some of these like business exceptions and really forces us to think about our business processes, right? And like what should we actually be doing in order to like transact, right? So I think it's really great that you all are starting to see that. And I think it's only going to create more benefits for Johnson Controls. So, your first use case is invoice processing, but maybe like forward thinking, like if you think about the technology and like now being able to see the art of the possible, where do you see unstructured data playing a role in adding value at Johnson Controls?
Well, unstructured data, there's a use case, and I'll call it an edge case at the moment, but there's a use case where we want to look at vendor terms. That may be more in the semi-structured than unstructured, but when you're looking at vendor contracts or client contracts on client paper or vendor paper, they're not in your format, right? So the idea of being able to ingest those and understand terms, conditions, risks, that's a potential that's out there at the moment. We're also looking at a couple of use cases around supply chain modeling and being able to do predictive analytics on some of the information and some of the supplier metrics that we get and how we grade suppliers and whatnot, and be able to understand where they're trending and possibly take action prior to something being necessary. Also around contract renewal and contract upsells, being able to look at the customer churn and say, okay, based upon the data that we have on this customer and their interactions with us, they're at a risk to change suppliers, or they're at a risk to drop a contract, or they may be a great potential for another contract, right? So having that kind of predictive analytics, that's maybe more often to the data and analytics side, but I look at data and analytics and RPA and ML all being this giant Venn diagram of they all use each other, they can all benefit from each other, so we have plenty of opportunities like that. We've been looking at different tools. C3 AI, Azure has a number of in their stack, Abacus. We haven't settled on a final vendor yet. I think we're trying to gather more use cases and kind of understand what our needs going to be before we really decide on a tool. But those cases are there, certainly, and that'll only grow as the capabilities of the tools and I hate to use the buzzword AI, but as those things mature and you see models that kind of center around various concepts like supply chain or customer management, or their tools will and expertise will come out in those particular tools and those particular facets.
Yeah, so really being able to like normalize that unstructured data into like a structured way is going to allow you to unlock these analytics, right? Having like better access, cleaner access, more consistency in that data.
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest challenges within an organization is, you can imagine in Johnson Control, again, at Johnson Control size, just how much opportunity there is to automate processes, right? Because there's so many people doing things. One of the biggest issues that we've had in the company is the fact that we're such a fragmented IT universe, application wise and ERP wise. And so when you start looking at RPA and automation, you say, well, okay, yeah, I'd love to be able to automate the AP space. I'd love to be able to automate the AP processes. Okay, great. Noble goal. But when you start looking at how each business is using different applications or different ERPs or different processes in order to get, from point A to point P, then you realize that just the whole fractured nature is a barrier to doing automation. And that's why, having a CI component or a continuous improvement, component or process improvement component ahead of automation from a process optimization standpoint is really where we found the best benefit.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I know we only have 5 minutes left. So Rachel, I want to make sure we open it up to any questions from the audience.
Yes, I just sent over a question from an audience asking, hey, Chris, AI tools are better understand unstructured data. Is there an alternative other than AI? Are you looking at any other technology or integrations of other tools?
At this point, no. I mean, the thing of it is this is such a changing space at the moment. And there's a little bit of hesitation on exactly which horse you hitch your wagon to, trying to decide, okay, is this a predominant use case in our business, or is this a predominant use case? So beyond those 3 products, there's a few more, but really we haven't branched out any further than that.
Perfect. We polled our audience and we're seeing more companies looking to delve more deeply into customer journey friction points. And, as well as understanding or uncovering opportunities that are sometimes missed with your typical surveys. So can each of you share your takes on the potential unstructured data could have on transforming B2B, B2C? What can we do with that customer insight that allows us to break silos between the front, middle, and back office?
Brandi, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll start. I think, it is 2020. I'm a millennial, so I can call us out a little bit. But millennials and the generations upcoming really want their own experience, right? Their own unique experience. And I think what that means is there's even more variety, right? Or fragmentation in like how we transact as like B2C or even B2B. So if you think about that, right, like in order to create stickiness with customers, you need to ensure that they have the experience that they want. And that's going to come unstructured, given that there's going to be different experiences. So I think that's the first part. The second part is, like true customer analytics. Chris talked on this a little bit, like being able to actually understand your customers and what your customers are going through with the data that you have will actually help you proactively engage with your customers. And I think that's going to be a big part of the customer journey and unlocking unstructured data. And I'll let Chris answer from his perspective.
Yeah,
as well.
I'll dovetail to that. You can imagine with the thousands of products that we've got, and the thousands of different types of things that can be in a building, the potential of understanding your customer enough in order to say, okay, I know A through S on this particular customer, and based upon that, there's opportunities that I might be able to find on different service lines or different products within their slew of businesses, right? I might deal with a McDonald's franchise different than I might deal with an Amazon franchise, right? So, you based upon that type of intelligence and unstructured, even the correspondence and whatnot that you have with that customer, able to kind of guide you into how you can upsell or how you can keep that customer from leaving, by not upselling, but maybe downscaling or, providing a discount in order to keep that customer with you. I think that's probably one of the greatest areas.
Thank you. We have about 2 minutes left. So I'm mindful of time. I just wanted to ask, each of you if you have any lasting piece of advice that you'd like to share with our audience when we're looking at 2022. There's a lot of scaling. There's a lot of stepping outside your comfort zone and challenging your teams and your own technologies, your toolkits to do more, hopefully with less. But with that note, I want to give you the room to share some final thoughts.
Yeah, I'll share my perspective really quick and then I'll let Chris close us out. I think we're definitely at an inflection point with automation, right? Unstructured data is really exposing itself as we've gotten more mature with RPA. And I think, for most COEs or, business leaders, it's about starting to unlock that unstructured data to really think about not just end-to-end process automation, but all the things you can do by exposing that unstructured data in a normalized way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Automation is not new now. I mean, it's already a buzzword and the yesterday's topic, if you talk with a lot of my peers and whatnot. So the idea of now going into these things that RPA really can't do by itself, and that unstructured data, that is the next frontier. Being able to have tools that will take that and turn that into actionable data for you to use and empower the business in order to, empower that bottom line or recognize the revenue faster or serve the customer better. That's really where we're headed, at least within John's Controls. I think part of the other piece that we see moving forward is also more of with all the low code and no code tools, that are out there, is empowering the business in order to be nimble enough to do their own automation. Okay, now certainly there's some governance that needs to be done from a central COE, but this whole citizen development movement, which to some of my programming colleagues from previous generations will call, shadow IT, but now it's citizen development, right? And so that is the going trend right now within John's Controls as well, is allowing the business who's closest to the issue and closest to the need for automation, empowering them in order to be able to solve that solution. That's really the next wave within John's Controls.
Thank you, Brandi. Thank you, Chris, for joining our conversation today. It was so great to hear you benchmark, and we're excited that our audience also tune in and engage with you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.